Welcome back, Irish fans, to Breaking Down Braves Boys podcast. I guess I should say Wildcat fans too, because maybe there's a couple that came over for this one. But we're joined with Derek Terry, writer about the Wildcats. I'll put all his stuff in the description if you guys want to check him out. A lot of you probably came from him. But Mr. Terry, thanks for coming on. And I guess let's get to it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So I guess to start out, I'll ask you, can you give me a quick overview on all five of the Kentucky starters and what they bring to the table?
Yeah, this year, Cal so far he's only switched up the starting five a little bit. Last game it was Devin Askew, Brendan Boston, Terrence Clark, and then Isaiah Jackson at the 4. Those guys are all freshmen, and then Olivier Sarr, who I'm sure Notre Dame fans are familiar with from his time at Wake Forest, has been starting at the 5. Typically, I think Keon Brooks Jr. would have been in that starting 5, but he's been out all season with a calf injury. And then at one point, Cal switched it up for the second game of the year, and Cameron Fletcher started. But since then, Fletcher's not really played a whole lot. But in general, as recruits, Boston and Clark were highly thought of, 2 top 10 guys. They've had their ups and downs so far through 4 games. Both guys have shown pretty good signs of being good players, but also freshman struggles as well. Askew's really had a hard time. He's not shown too many flashes yet. He was a reclassification. He's a guy who could still be a senior in high school had he not come to college that year early. So he's still trying to get his feet under him, I think. But Sarr, a pretty good rep out of Wake Forest. He has been automatic almost when he's gotten the ball in the block this year, but he's having a really hard time staying out of foul trouble. His minutes aren't very high because he's having to pick up silly fouls, and he's going to the bench for long periods of time. So the other guy, Jackson, he's probably been their best all-around player, especially defensively in terms of blocking shots. Great rebounder as well. He's someone that I think could eventually maybe play his way into the lottery this year if he keeps at the pace that he's on. But he's got to work a little bit on his offensive game, but defensively, man-to-man, he's given up some buckets this year, but he's great off the ball blocking shots, and has by far been their best rebounder this season.
Gotcha. You mentioned Olivier Sarr a little bit. I'm not sure if you know this, but he's kind of earned the reputation as like a Notre Dame killer recently. Him and Cole Anthony were kind of 2 guys we hated to see on the schedule last year. And I know Wake Forest fans were complaining last year because they called it like the Olivier Sarr experience, where he would drop 4 points and then come back against Notre Dame and have 30 the next night. But what have you really seen from him this season, and have you been impressed from what you were expecting?
Yeah, I think his footwork is really, really good, because at Kentucky you're used to seeing a lot of young bigs who – I told someone this, I think during the Richmond game, or maybe it was Kansas. Offensively, he's probably my favorite guy to watch at Kentucky in the post since Karl Anthony Towns, just in terms of his footwork and his offensive skill. Very good facing up. But like I said, the biggest thing for him right now is he just can't stay on the floor. And he's not really been that good of a defender either to this point. He's given up a lot of buckets. He's fouling, of course, too much. I think the Kansas game, he only played 14 minutes because he was pretty much out the whole – picked up 2 early fouls, picked up a really bad 4th foul with I think like maybe 10 minutes left or something like that. It really drew the ire of Calipari in his post game. So I think he's someone who's probably having to adjust as well. Of course, he's been in college for I guess this is his 4th year in college, but at Kentucky he's at a new team. Things I'm sure are done much differently at Kentucky versus Wake Forest. But what did he have, 30 and 17 last year, I think, at one point against Notre Dame? I might be getting the team wrong, but I knew when I was writing the stories whenever he came to Kentucky, there was one game in there that he was just going off on a team. So he's not quite shown that this year at Kentucky. And, of course, I can't lie and say I watched much Wake Forest basketball. Judging by his numbers, he seemed like he was probably their number 1 option, whereas here at Kentucky, still a priority for sure in the offense, but I don't see him being the guy at the end of the year who's going to be leading the team in shots or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about that 30-point, 17-rebound game, that was definitely us. He pretty much ended up at his hopes last year. Not a big fan of him. And the stats, I think I looked at his stats. I don't think he's having a big year at all, like you said. What is he?
No.
Averaging under 10 and about 6 boards a game. And that's going to go way up based on the past games we've had. It is interesting, though. I think we have seen that with foul trouble with him. Kind of same thing as Notre Dame's bigs at times. Jawan Durham had I think he fouled out with like 10 minutes left against Ohio State. So that should be a really interesting battle to watch down low. But I guess we'll ask you next, moving off of Olivier Sarr, because I know Notre Dame fans don't want to hear about him much going into this one. Is there anything schematically unique about Kentucky? Like, do they run a certain zone defense a lot, or a fast-paced offense, or anything like that?
Yeah, Calipari more or less refuses to play zone defense. Obviously, the messaging for Kentucky, for better or worse, depending on what fans you talk to, everything about UK's program is pretty much geared towards helping kids once they get to the NBA. And there is very rare circumstances that would ever lead him to play his zone. So for Notre Dame's offense, pretty clearly, I think they're gonna be seeing a lot of man-to-man, unless it's just really bad and they got to switch it up and go to zone. Offensively, I think they want to get out and run a little bit more because their half-court sets right now are brutal. If you watch any Kentucky games, they're really struggling just to even get into an offense. Very few good shots coming out of it. Yeah, I mean, the offense is a mess. I don't watch a ton of college basketball outside of Kentucky when I'm not working, but I had Iowa and North Carolina on the other night, and then Illinois and Duke. And just the way that those teams are able to get easy shots and to set each other up, I mean, it looks like they're playing a different sport right now than Kentucky. It's about as bad as I can remember a young team. And I guess it might make sense because Kentucky has 10 new players, and they didn't have any exhibition games this year. They didn't have a normal summer to be together. And I don't think their schedule has been as difficult as Calipari would say it's been, because Georgia Tech they had lost to Georgia State and Mercer before they beat Kentucky. So I don't think it was probably asking too much for Kentucky to be able to beat Georgia Tech, but they really got crushed. I mean, they were down 20 points in the second half by Georgia Tech. So I think they do want to get out and run a little bit more, like I said, but I'll be curious this game offensively if up to this point Devin Askew has really either played more minutes or they've split Davion Mintz and Askew's minutes. I'll be curious to see if he goes to Mintz. Mintz is a guy from Creighton, fifth-year guy, someone who's been around a long time and should be able to handle pressure a little bit better and should be doing a better job getting them into the offense. So that would be something I would watch for on Saturday.
Gotcha. You kind of mentioned how awful of a start they've had. Georgia Tech, obviously, not a great loss to have on your resume. And they're 1-3 because of it. You mentioned the freshmen a little bit, but do you think that's kind of the biggest reason for the collapse to start the season?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would put a lot of it on it's just a weird year, and it's still early to tell because I think Boston and Clark are very talented, but a lot of the expectations for this group really hinged on those two guys being the kind of elite freshman recruits that Kentucky was getting early in the Calipari days. Because around here, I think a lot of people felt like the one and done era early in the Cal tenure was so good because they had guys like John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, of course, Brendan Knight, even guys like that who were very, very good college players their 1 year here. And there's a belief that that's dropped off a little bit in terms of the guys they've been able to get. And the recruiting, I mean, it would show that Boston was the first top 5 guy since I think Sky Labissiere in 2015. So they were still getting 5-star kids, but not the kids at the top of the class. And it's just kind of a long way to say that those two guys are going to have to meet those expectations, I think, for this group to really turn it around. I would say Sarr has been – I don't want to call him a disappointment yet because it's so early in the season, but I mean, foul trouble was an issue for him at Wake Forest, and it's continued over. So I think you kind of worry about a guy who's in a senior year who has the same problems over and over. If that's ever going to be corrected, I think that's fair to wonder. And then their bench play. They play a lot of guys, but they've not really been getting a whole lot from the guys on the bench. Lance Ware plays a lot off the bench in the post, mainly because Keon Brooks is out. And he really struggles. He doesn't seem like someone who's ready to play significant minutes, and that hurts when you're a little bit thin. I mean, they've got bodies, but it's just they're not getting a ton of quality play from those guys on the bench. I mean, there are a lot of things I think that have gone into how bad they've started. I don't know if I can just pinpoint one thing. Another thing I've not even mentioned is how bad they are at shooting threes. They actually shot the ball a little bit better against Georgia Tech. They went, I think, 8 for 19, but they turned it over 21 times. So they've had a game against Kansas. They only made 3 threes, and then against Richmond, they didn't make any. So and that game was in Rupp Arena, where the game is Saturday, obviously. So even being at home hasn't seemed to help them a ton shooting the ball. So it's hard to win games when you turn the ball over a lot and then you get outscored heavily from the 3-point line.
Mhm. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the 3-point too. I was going to bring that up. 25% as a team on the year so far.
Yeah.
Not ideal. And then Bray loves the assist to turnover ratio, 11 assists to 18 turnovers a game. Not exactly ideal, especially against an experienced Notre Dame team. So I think that's something they could definitely take
Yeah.
advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty brutal. I don't know if you have the stats pulled up. I think Davion Mintz is the only guy on the team who has more assists than turnovers. There might be one more guy, but it's bad. Pretty much everybody who plays turns the ball over more than they assist on
Yeah,
passes.
just taking a glance at it, yeah, it looks like that. And
Yeah.
Askew is 2.3 assists to 3.3 turnovers. That's
Yeah. Yeah, and he plays the third most minutes on the team, so he's out there a lot, and it's not always positive minutes. But I assume Calipari thinks that in order to reach their ceiling as a team, that he needs to have a young guy in there playing. So, like I said, though, I don't know if he'll. I think he's got to reach a point now where if the losses keep piling up, he's kind of got to make a decision as to what's best for the team, and maybe not what's necessarily best for Devin Askew's draft stock at the end of the year. So, we'll see if they reach that point or not on Saturday.
gotcha. So we talked a lot about negative stuff about Kentucky. Do you think there's a player or area that's been a big bright spot for them this year?
I think as a team, even though they're struggling really bad on offense, I think as a team you can see that they could be an elite defensive team, especially when Keon Brooks gets back, whenever that may be. He's out for another few weeks. But you could have lineups where Terrence Clark, B.J. Boston, Keon Brooks, Starr, and Jackson are out there, and that's everybody who is 6'6" at least. And I don't have the numbers pulled up in front of me, but Georgia Tech started shooting the ball. I think Georgia Tech probably did better against them than anybody else. I mean, when Kansas beat them last week, Kansas shot 30% from the field. So, I mean, they did a good enough job on defense to win that game. It's just scoring was such a problem for this offense. So, at the end of the year, I think you could see that this is one of the better defensive teams, which is not abnormal. I mean, Calipari's teams, to his credit, it's a lot of new guys every year, yet they find a way to buy in on defense, and they really do play pretty good defense. So defending the three, I think they've done a pretty good job this year, but maybe that's just kind of dumb luck. Maybe teams just haven't made open shots. I know that's happened before in some of his tenure. But then again, at the same time, I do think that the length that they can provide on defense can bother some teams.
For sure. Notre Dame's had some really tough matchups early on this year with the guard play. On the defensive end, Michigan State, even Detroit Mercy's giving them problems with their ball pressure. You think Kentucky's going to pressure them a lot, or it's just a matter of length, getting the passing lanes and stuff like that?
I mean, they get after it on defense. I mean, I think, Askew, to his credit, I think does a pretty good job defending. Perhaps that's what's keeping him on the floor so much is even though the offense isn't really performing that well, Calipari's big thing is if you can play defense, you'll get a chance to play. And Askew, he's a guy that he's a little bigger for a guard. I mean, I think he's like 6'3". So that was one of the questions that Cal had. I don't know the complete makeup of Notre Dame's roster, but one of the big questions he had early in the year was if they were playing a team with smaller, quicker guards, how would they defend them? And they happened to run into a kid at Richmond who was like 5'9" and apparently one of the best guards in NCAA because he was close to breaking the steals record. He's probably broken it by now. But I think they certainly want to pressure him, but definitely just that length of getting out, contesting shots, grabbing rebounds. I think that's why they've been so effective so far this season.
Gotcha. So I know you don't necessarily know a ton about Notre Dame's roster, but is there like a matchup or a concern for you about Notre Dame or just about Kentucky in general with the turnovers or anything heading in this game that you're really worried about?
Yeah, I would say for Kentucky, it's got to be the turnovers. I mean, they've started this week what Calipari calls Camp Cal, which is always during the break when school's over, once the semester's over, they'll stay and they'll practice 2 or 3 times a day, probably twice a day. And that's in the past, that's where you've really seen these teams, these young guys really come together, and they usually play a lot better after that. But this year, I mean, it's already been a weird year anyway. It's a little bit earlier, it seems like. for this, but basically his two talking points were toughness and turnovers. So they got to cut down on the turnovers for sure. And then the toughness part, I don't know exactly. I can't think of any examples that maybe have really set him off. Obviously, something has if it's one of his big talking points, but I would just expect that for Kentucky's end to really be trying to take care of the basketball on the defensive end. You know, Isaiah Jackson got bullied a little bit by, I believe his name was Moses Wright at Georgia Tech, and I mean he really took it to him. So I think he'll want to see some guys toughen up a little bit, probably mentally as well. I'm thinking of a guy like Askew, who's got to come along a lot. That's probably the focus for that. And then, I mean, like I said, I don't know a ton about Notre Dame. It just seems like I remember watching them play a few times over the years. I mean, maybe you could tell me some more about this team. Is it a good three-point shooting team? Because if it is, it's always going to be a struggle for Kentucky with how poorly they shoot the ball. If another team gets hot, it's going to be hard to win.
Yeah, that's kind of Notre Dame's like thing on offense, and it's actually been their demise at points because they live and die off of it so much.
Yeah,
we saw that like 2 days ago against Ohio State. They pretty much just threw the game away because they couldn't get to the basket. So that could definitely be a big storyline going in this one if Kentucky can't stop three-point shooters. This is also unrelated to the game, but that sounds brutal. 2 to 3 practices a day. That's
yeah. I don't know what the NCAA rules are on that, but I know they definitely go multiple times a day. I know there's a certain amount of hours you're allowed to practice. So, especially around this time of year, on the holidays, that they typically let them go home, which it's still early for that now. I mean, usually school would still be in session, typically, in a normal year. But, you know, it's around Christmas. Usually after the CBS Sports Classic is when the kids go home, and when they come back, I mean, they undergo a few more days of that, and then it's pretty much SEC play starts after that, and it'll be similar again this year unless they schedule some new games. But the way the schedule is this year, it's so fluid. It's like you never know what's going to get canceled and when things are going to get rescheduled.
yeah. Just tell me about it. We got like 3 games canceled already, but going into this one, what do you think Kentucky has to do to beat Notre Dame? I think we touched on a lot of it, but anything else?
You know, I just think it's a talking point for Kentucky. I think there needs to be, even if they don't win, and this is really weird to say for Kentucky basketball because the expectation is they're supposed to win every game, just to look better. I think the biggest problem with Georgia Tech is they just look so bad. Like they didn't really have a clue offensively what they were doing. I think if they can show some signs of life, I think being back in Rupp Arena will help them. You know, it didn't help against Richmond, but I just think the comfort of being at home will help these guys out a little bit. I want to see some better offense that produces better looks, even if all the threes don't fall. I mean, just get some good looks, make some shots if you get the chance. But overall, Sarr needs to stay out of foul trouble. They need to play better defensively. And the big thing is just sharing the basketball. It was a huge problem against Richmond, as it was just all one-on-one, guys trying to take it to the hoop. They were not very good when they were doing that. So cut down on those turnovers, get the assists a little bit better. And for Notre Dame, I got to, like I said, without looking at the roster, I'm just assuming Kentucky's probably a little bit more athletic than those guys. So in that event, use your athleticism to your advantage and don't let a team get hot from three, because there have been plenty of teams, not just in the Cal era, but overall, that have come in and shot the lights out in Rupp. And they need to avoid that, because I think that's one of the quickest ways for me to think that they won't have much hope is if Kentucky makes 3 or 4 threes, but Notre Dame hits 11 or 12 or something like that. I think that's a really tough margin for Kentucky to rebound from.
Yeah, definitely. I know we're talking about moral victories here, and I don't know how confident you are in this one, but do you have a prediction for this one?
I really don't. Most years, a game like this, I would think Kentucky would win. But at the same time, once they just got crushed by Georgia Tech, I mean, I couldn't say confidently that I think Kentucky would win on Saturday. But at the same time, Notre Dame's 1-2, I think, and Detroit was a pretty tough game. It seemed like, at least I looked at the score, it seemed like it was decently close, and I don't know how good Detroit is, although I think Detroit did kind of stay with Michigan State for a while as well.
Yeah,
that was a team Kentucky was supposed to play. Calipari's son actually plays for Detroit, but that game's been postponed twice. But no, I don't. For basketball, I typically don't go in picking wins and losses, and if people do want to laugh at me, I picked this Kentucky team to go 23-4 preseason. So my prediction wouldn't hold much weight regardless, because they're already about to the 4-loss mark.
Yeah, hopefully for you that your prediction is validated by I mean, that's kind of all we have for you, unless you have anything else you want to touch on about Kentucky. Just
That's no, that's about. I don't know. Calipari's press conference is tomorrow. I don't know if Bray talked about it. Is this the first meeting since they played in the Elite Eight in
yeah, pretty
2015?
sure it is.
So that was, I thought, one of the all-time. I'm sure it was a heartbreaker, no doubt, for Notre
Yeah,
Dame fans. But I thought it was one of the best tournament games that I've watched Kentucky playing. I mean, it was one of the all-time great games, and obviously Kentucky was undefeated, and that only lasted one more week because they lost the next game anyway to Wisconsin. But that was a great game, and I'm sure Calipari will discuss that a little bit. I think I saw some kind of tweet today that maybe Bray talked about him texting Calipari during
yeah,
quarantine. So that was a cool little anecdote. Maybe we could get some more out of Cal tomorrow and make that a story. But looking forward to it for sure. Notre Dame coming back to town. I guess they're scheduled to play for the next few years, so it'll
yeah.
be something that maybe next year we'll get in touch again.
All right, so now that we've got some really good insight about the Wildcats from Derek Terry, I wanted to put some clips in from what Coach Bray said about Kentucky from his press conference on Thursday. He didn't say too much in-depth stuff, but he did say some good, like little notes about them. So I'll play those clips now. Here you go.
You're right. I mean, the you get a chance to play against Kentucky basketball. It's one of the reasons I scheduled the game. The brand, the history. Again, I understand they're 1-3, but I also understand they have 3 first-round picks, and the light bulb is going to go on, and they've got a heck of a coach, and so the light bulb's going to go on. I look at the NBA draft projections, and 2 of those starters are in the top 10, and I believe Sarr will be a first-round pick. So it's not like they're hurting for talent, but
All right, so that's what Coach Bray said on the game. I wanted to touch on OSU a little bit. Wasn't able to get Jake on because of scheduling and stuff tonight. Hopefully, we can get him back next week, but I'm really busy next week, so I don't know if I'll be able to get him. But I'm going to start with my thoughts on OSU. I think it was just overall just another example of what we've seen over and over again over the past couple of years. You got to beat one of these ranked teams, and I thought that was a great opportunity for them to do it. I don't think Kentucky's ranked anymore, just because they have 3 losses. Actually, I'm pretty certain they're not ranked anymore. But OSU was a really good chance to win. OSU played a really good game. EJ Liddell, Washington both had good games, especially late down the stretch. You got to get more production from Cormac and Nate late in the game. Durham can't fall out. I mean, I think the starter, maybe the only starter I liked the production of in that game was Prentice. I think Dane had an okay game, nothing crazy, but I liked what I saw from Zona also. The depth just killed us. Guys just ran out of gas late in the game, and Ohio State kind of adjusted because there was not that many guys on the floor. So I think getting depth soon is going to be really important. Fortunately, Jogo is not going to be available for this game. Bray said maybe next Wednesday against Duke he'll be available. You really hopefully at Duke, maybe we can even have Wirtz and Jogo. I think that's kind of pipe dream for now, but it's possible. So I don't know. I thought that was a decent performance. You just got to get one of those big wins at some point. And I think this is a big opportunity for him also against a really talented Kentucky team. This win could look really good later on. Even if Kentucky's not great now, it's going to look great maybe in March when they're deciding who to put in. And winning against Kentucky could be huge, especially if they bounce back later in the season. So that's really what I was thinking. Maybe it doesn't look great now when you win this game, or if, hopefully, when. But maybe it doesn't look great now, but later down the stretch, I think it could be huge. So with that being said, I'm going to get into my keys to the game. Number one's forced turnovers. Boston and Askew have been really careless with the ball in their hands early on. Pretty much all their guards and forward, like a lot of their forwards, even Jackson. I don't think Sarr has that many turnovers, but all their freshmen have been really careless with the ball. So I think if you throw a bunch of different looks at them, with the 1-3-1 they were running for a little bit, I think it was against Detroit Mercy they ran that. To go into a 2-3, which they didn't really run effectively at all against OSU, I think that could change, especially with how awful Kentucky shot threes recently. I think that could be huge. But I think if you switch up the looks on them and force turnovers, make them take bad shots early in the shot clock like they like to do, I think the zone could be a big part of that. But Forcing turnovers is going to be huge in this game. If Kentucky's guards can get comfortable and run their offense well, I think that's going to be tough for Notre Dame to overcome. So that's my first key. My second key is keeps the bigs out of foul trouble. You saw how little depth we have. We literally have 7 guys. Only one of them is a big man. I guess you could go small ball with Sanders if you have to. But in a game where Olivier Sarr, a 7-footer, if he's playing against Matt Zona or Leszewski, who actually did a really good job on him in the first weight game last year, but you need Durham out there for a lot of the game to kind of maybe negate him a little bit. I think it's going to be really tough to stop him. Bray said he doesn't think anybody can guard him one-on-one, so you're going to need all 3 bigs to be out there at some point guarding him, and you just got to stay out of foul trouble. Can't foul out with 10 minutes left in the game like Durham did against OSU, so that's going to be a big key for me. And then third, I normally like to go more in-depth, more schematical stuff, but you just got to shoot the lights out against them. That's my third key. We were talking about it earlier in the show, that some teams come into Rupp and they shoot the lights out and beat Kentucky. Notre Dame's a team that I saw a lot of creating your own shot off the dribble from Cormac and Dane, which was a nice surprise, but you're going to have to shoot the lights out. It's going to be tough to create your own shot against a team with the kind of length Kentucky has. So I think it's going to be really tough. But if you can go out there, shoot 40, upper 30% from 3, as a team, you're going to have a shot in this game. You're going to have to hit 10 threes. I remember Bray was telling you late in the year that you got to hit 10 threes to beat this team. You got to hit 10 threes to beat this team. You're going to have to hit 10 threes to win this game. So that's huge for me. And then the matchup to watch, we talked about him a ton throughout the show, for good reason. Notre Dame killer. Olivier Sarr versus Notre Dame's bigs. Touched on it a bit earlier, but the foul trouble killed Notre Dame's bigs. It also has destroyed Olivier Sarr earlier in the year. But whoever doesn't stay in foul trouble can have a big matchup or big advantage in this matchup. Obviously, Olivier Sarr is known as the Notre Dame killer. Hopefully this is a game where they change that. He hasn't had a great start to the season early on, averaging less than 10 and less than 6 boards a game. So that's huge. But we all know what he does against Notre Dame. He had like 6 points against Virginia Tech right after he pretty much ended our season last year in Winston-Salem. So hopefully they can stop him. Bray said he doesn't think anybody can guard him one-on-one in the press conference today. So it's going to be really rough. They were talking about earlier how he's automatic on the block. That's going to be tough. But it's going to be a challenge. And if you can keep him under 20 points or around 20 points, you're going to have a lot better shot than if he just goes to town on Durham and Nate and Zone all day. So that's going to be a huge key for me. My leading scorer for this one's going to be Hub. I mean, I don't really love any of the matchups down low with the athleticism and shot blocking that Kansas has. How many blocks? Jackson's averaging 3.2 and Sarr is averaging 1.3. So that's going to be tough to get to the basket. Like 4.5, 5 blocks combined between their bigs. That's not ideal at all. So I think we were talking about earlier, Askew has trouble guarding quick, shifty guards. I think Prentice Hub could give him a lot of trouble. So I'm going to pick Hub. Can't really go wrong with him the way he's been scoring this year. And everybody else has been somewhat inconsistent. I guess Nate's been pretty good all year, but I'm going to go with Hub as the leading scorer for Notre Dame. And my prediction, this is a really tough game to get a read on because Notre Dame's 1-2. Kentucky's 1-3. Both teams playing with their backs against the wall, like Bray was talking about. But I'm going to go with Notre Dame by 5. Just taking a leap of faith there. A lot of time, I would say wait and see, but I'm going to go with Notre Dame for this one. I'm 2-1 on the year for predictions. I think Jake is 2-1 also. He picked a win against Ohio State. Or no, he picked a loss against Ohio State. I picked a win. That's where the difference was. But hopefully I can get this one. I would love to see Notre Dame win this game. I think it'd be a huge step in the right direction for the program. even if Kentucky's not what they were in the last couple of years, this could still be huge, especially with all the talent on Kentucky and all the challenges they present, even though they shoot themselves in the foot a lot. But that's all I got. Thank you guys for watching. Go Irish, and we'll have a Duke preview in a couple of days. Peace.